It didn't unfold slowly. It all erupted at once. One moment, Talladega Superspeedway race looked calm. Cars moved in tight formation, drivers playing the long game, saving fuel, waiting for the perfect moment. Then, suddenly, chaos. A violent chain reaction tore through the field. In seconds, 26 cars were wiped out. And the most unsettling part? Some drivers sensed it coming long before it happened. This wasn't just a wreck, it was tension finally boiling over, a warning that had been ignored. The race had already been walking a dangerous edge. Drivers weren't truly racing, they were calculating. Half throttle, conserving fuel, holding position. It looked controlled, but underneath, pressure was building. Everyone knew the alternative. If you weren't saving fuel, you were doing the opposite, pushing aggressively, forcing risky moves, squeezing through gaps that barely existed. There was no middle ground. As Joey Logano put it, there were only two options, and both had already played out. Then stage 2 began. The patience disappeared. Bubba Wallace was leading right where every driver wants to be, but behind him, the pack closed in fast. Ross Chastain surged forward, linking up with Ryan Blaney and Logano. The pushes grew harder, the space tighter. Then it happened. A hit from behind sent Wallace sideways. He shot up the track, slammed into the wall, then came back down into traffic. There was nowhere to go. Cars collided, spun, and slammed into each other in a relentless chain reaction. Red flag. Silence except for the wreckage. When drivers climbed out, the mood shifted immediately. This wasn't just bad luck. Something deeper was wrong. Blaney didn't hold back. He made it clear he wants changes to the car. According to him, the racing itself is the problem. Cars are stacked too close together, constantly bumping, barely staying under control until they don't. Even in the middle of the chaos, drivers try to explain what keeps happening. Blaney described it as constant bumping with unstable cars. One small mistake, and everything collapses. He called it pinballing. That word says everything. Not racing, not competing, just surviving impacts until you can't. Wallace took responsibility, even though the issue was bigger than any one driver. He admitted they need to improve how they push, but the reality goes beyond driver error. Because at the center of it all is the car itself, the next-gen machine, built to improve racing, but according to drivers, it's doing the opposite at tracks like Talladega. Logano explained it simply, but the meaning is serious. The cars are unstable, especially when pushing. He compared it to pushing two basketballs together. They don't move straight. They wobble, shift, and break apart. Now imagine that at nearly 200 miles per hour. That's not control, that's chaos waiting to happen. And it did. The crash didn't just eliminate cars, it wiped out contenders. Blaney, Logano, Wallace, all gone before the final stage. Teams stood in the garage staring at destroyed machines, asking the same question: how many times will this keep happening? Because this wasn't new, it just felt bigger and impossible to ignore. As the race somehow continued, frustration turned into anger. You could hear it in every interview. Logano called it frustrating. Short, but loaded with meaning. Blaney went further. He explained how drivers are stuck between two extremes, fuel saving or pushing aggressively, and both lead to problems. The cars become unstable, start bouncing, ping-ponging, and eventually lose control. That's not racing, that's barely holding things together. What's worse, drivers don't expect change anytime soon. Blaney admitted it likely won't happen this season, maybe next year, but that's months away, which means more races like this could be coming. And yet, the race had to go on. Out of the wreckage, a completely different story emerged. Carson Hocevar, in his 91st start, still searching for his first win, suddenly found himself leading what remained of the field. This wasn't about strategy anymore. It was survival racing, aggressive, physical, every move critical. He battled Chris Buescher lap after lap. It wasn't clean, couldn't be. Contact happened. Another spin, another caution. The tension never left. Then came the final laps, a full-on fight. No space, no margin for error. Hocevar held on. Checkered flag, his first win. But even that moment felt different. His celebration was chaotic, half climbing out of the car while it was still moving, then slamming into a wild burnout against the wall. It looked more like an emotional release than a planned celebration. When he spoke, it all poured out: gratitude, exhaustion, disbelief. He talked about his family, his dream, and the people who supported him. It should have been a perfect ending, but it wasn't that simple, because behind him, the wreck still lingered. The frustration didn't disappear just because someone won. If anything, it made the contrast sharper. One driver celebrating the biggest moment of his life. Others wondering why they never even got the chance. 26 cars. That number doesn't just fade away. And maybe that's the real story. Not just the crash, not just the win, but the gap between them, the feeling that something isn't right, that the system isn't working the way it should. When drivers compare race cars to basketballs, when they talk about bouncing and surviving instead of racing, when they already believe nothing will change until next year, you have to ask, how many more wrecks like this will it take before something finally changes? And when it does, will it already be too late?